A week before Christmas, I overheard my parents making plans to turn me into their free babysitter without even asking me, and they spoke about it like it was already decided. I stood just outside the kitchen doorway, the soft hum of the fridge filling the silence between their words. My mother's voice was casual, almost amused. "We'll just tell her to come early. Once she's here, she won't say no." My father chuckled. "Of course she won't. She never does." That was the moment something in me shifted quietly. Completely. They weren't asking. They weren't even considering me. To them, I wasn't family in that moment. I was convenience. I stepped back before they could notice me. My heartbeat steady, my face calm. No confrontation, no scene. Just clarity, for the first time. I didn't feel hurt. I felt precise. And that's when I decided I wouldn't be there this Christmas at all. I'm the middle child, the reliable one, the quiet one. The one who doesn't make things complicated. That's how my parents have always described me to others, usually with a smile that sounds like praise but feels like dismissal. My older brother built his life around excuses and unfinished plans, drifting in and out whenever it suited him. My younger sister had children early, and from that moment on, everything in the family seemed to orbit around her needs. Emergencies, last-minute favors, weekend help, it all somehow landed on me. At first I didn't question it. I told myself it was temporary, that families adjust, that someone has to be dependable. So I showed up. Every birthday, every holiday, every unexpected call that started with, "We didn't know who else to ask." But over time, the pattern became impossible to ignore. They didn't ask because they respected me. They asked because they assumed I wouldn't refuse. And when I did hesitate, just once or twice, it was met with quiet disappointment, subtle guilt, the kind that lingers longer than any argument. So I learned to stay agreeable, to keep things smooth, to make myself useful, until usefulness became the only thing they saw in me. The week leading up to Christmas unfolded exactly the way it always did, quiet. Assumptions disguised as casual, conversations. My sister called first, her tone light, almost distracted. "We're all coming early this year," she said, pausing just long enough to sound thoughtful. "It'll be easier with the kids if you're there, too." She didn't ask if I was available. She simply moved on, already certain of the answer. Later that evening, my mother sent a message. "Don't forget to come early. We'll need help setting things up." No greeting, no question, just a reminder for something I had never agreed to. At dinner a few days later, my father barely looked at me when he spoke. His eyes stayed on his plate, his voice steady. "You'll handle the kids while we prepare dinner," he said, as if assigning a task that had already been accepted. I noticed the small things, the way conversations paused just long, enough for me to fill the gap. The way decisions were made around me, never with me. No one was being cruel. That was the unsettling part. They were simply comfortable assuming I would always be there to make things easier. And that quiet certainty began to feel heavier than any direct demand. The turning point didn't arrive with raised voices or some dramatic confrontation. It came quietly, in the same kitchen where I had first overheard them. Only this time, I was sitting at the table, and they spoke as if I weren't there. My mother was listing things out, her fingers tapping lightly against her mug. "She can watch the kids while we finish cooking. And after dinner, she'll clean up. It's easier that way." My father nodded, adding, "Just make sure she doesn't leave early this time." I looked up, waiting, just for a second, for one of them to glance at me, to include me, to acknowledge that I was part of the conversation. They didn't. That absence said more than anything they could have asked. In that moment, it became clear. This wasn't temporary and it wasn't accidental. It was a role they had already decided I would always play, and I had been the one agreeing to it, silently, repeatedly. I felt something settle into place, calm and precise. No anger, no urge to argue, just a simple decision. I wouldn't explain. I wouldn't push back. I would remove myself entirely and let them face what they had assumed. I would always absorb. I didn't act immediately. I gave it a day, just enough time to make sure the decision wasn't emotional. When nothing shifted, when no one reached out to actually ask me anything, I moved forward. I opened my laptop that evening, the glow of the screen steady and quiet. I compared flights, checked hotel availability, read reviews with the same focus I usually reserved for work deadlines. No rush, no hesitation, just careful selection. I chose a place far enough to make returning inconvenient, but not impossible. just in case they tried to turn it into urgency. I booked everything under my own schedule, my own terms. Flights confirmed. Hotel paid in full. Notifications silenced. When my mother sent another message, "Make sure you're here by the 24th morning," I didn't respond. Not out of defiance, but because there was nothing to clarify. At work, I submitted my leave request early, framing it as a personal holiday. No overlap, no room for adjustment. Approved within hours. I didn't announce my plans. I didn't hint at them. I simply removed myself from the role they had written for me and let the timing speak for itself. Christmas Eve arrived without urgency. I was sitting by a wide window overlooking a quiet stretch of coastline, the sky fading into a muted gold as the sun lowered itself into the horizon. The air carried a calm I hadn't realized I'd been missing. No noise, no expectations, just space. My phone buzzed against the table. Once, then again, then continuously. I let it ring. When I finally glanced at the screen, my father's name filled it, followed by a string of missed calls and messages layered beneath. I answered on the fourth attempt, more out of timing than obligation. "Why aren't you here yet?" he demanded, his voice tight, controlled but fraying at the edges. In the background, I could hear overlapping voices, a child crying, something clattering to the floor. I leaned back slightly, watching the light disappear beyond the water. "Don't wait for me," I said evenly. "I'm enjoying my own holiday." There was a pause, long enough to register, short enough to feel sharp. Behind him, the noise grew louder, questions, confusion, movement. His voice didn't come back. The line stayed open for a moment longer, just long enough for me to hear everything unravel without me. The messages started that same night, first scattered, then relentless. My sister's texts came in fragments. "Where are you? This isn't funny. You knew we needed help." There was no question about why I wasn't there, only frustration that I had stepped outside the role they depended on. My mother called the next morning. I didn't answer, but her voicemail was softer, measured. She didn't mention the chaos directly. Instead, she said, "You could have told us, not asked me, not checked with me, just told, as if the decision had still been theirs to approve." Later, my father sent a single message. "We managed." I read it twice. Not angry, not apologetic, just factual. And that was the shift. For the first time, they had been forced to adjust without me, to rearrange, to take responsibility, to feel the weight of something I had quietly carried for years. It wasn't about ruining their Christmas. It was about showing them, without argument, without explanation, that my absence had value. And maybe more importantly, that my presence always had. The quiet didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. On the morning after Christmas, I woke without urgency, sunlight spilling softly across the room. No missed calls that demanded answers. No expectations waiting to be fulfilled. Just a steady, unfamiliar sense of control over my own time. I didn't rush to check my phone, but when I did, the messages had slowed. The tone had changed, shorter, more careful, as if something unspoken had shifted. No one asked me to come early anymore. No one assumed that didn't mean everything was fixed. It wasn't. Patterns like that don't disappear overnight, but something important had been interrupted. The certainty that I would always be available, always agreeable, always there to absorb what no one else wanted to carry. And in its place, there was space. I knew the next conversation wouldn't be easy. There would be pauses, careful words, maybe even quiet resistance. But this time, I wouldn't fill the silence for them. I would let it exist, because for the first time, I understood something simple, something steady. I wasn't stepping away to prove a point. I was stepping forward to claim a life that didn't require permission,